All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today we have Chief Adam Hawley from Brea PD. I am super excited to have him as a guest. I've actually known Chief Hawley for a couple of years now, just through the community, and so I know he's doing a lot of great things with his agency out in California. So, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, hello, Paige, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're gonna jump right in. Like I said before, like we've kind of known each other in passing through conferences and things like that. And I know that you have a passion for wellness, and wellness is a big part of not just your personal life, but also your professional life. But I want to first kind of get some background on you and where you came from and how you got started in this profession.
Sure. So I'm coming in now in 2025 to my 30th year in the profession. I grew up, as they would say, in my organization, starting as a police cadet when I was attending college. And then after graduation, became an officer and, rose through the ranks, served in a lot of different roles, both as a training officer, as an investigator, and then becoming field supervisor, sergeant, lieutenant, a couple different roles in lieutenant, captain, running one of our divisions, acting chief, and then really kind of unexpectedly, talking about a conversation about wellness here, in 2020, during the height of the pandemic and summer of 2020, my predecessor unexpectedly medically retired, and I became acting chief of police and navigated the next year or more during these unforeseen times, and ended up earning the permanent job as a result of that, and has been chief of police since.
That's amazing. And did you know early on, like this is the career that you wanted to enter into, or how did
Oh,
you come to that decision?
no, no, no. Early in my high school and even early college days, I was on a much different path and was exploring a different career entirely. And really was through an acquaintance that I even got introduced to policing. And once I did, then I became hooked. And after that, I completely switched gears, changed my major in college to criminal justice, ended up getting a part time job at the department while finishing up school. And then the rest is kind of history.
I love that. And was there one part of the career that you were really gravitating towards? Like what was that thing that hooked you in?
And I think it's the same for many of us. It's multifaceted. There's an overwhelming sense of people who are called to this profession to help others. That certainly was something I was interested in doing. I think there's a sense of being part of something bigger than just you, and in service to the community. You feel that in this profession, and then there's a sense of justice, helping victims of crime and holding those accountable who perpetrate crime is very rewarding. I particularly felt that way when I served as a crimes persons detective working on physical and sexual child abuse cases. Really challenging caseload, but very rewarding in the sense of putting people in prison for a long time for those heinous crimes and helping to provide some justice to families.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stuck out to me with what you just said is that you had this like deeper why behind
Mhm.
it, where you're like, I want to be in service of others, I want to help. And I find that there's a lot of conversation in this profession about knowing your why. How important do you think that has been throughout your career? And has your why changed throughout the 30 years, being in many different roles? Or do you feel like there's been one why that's kind of been the driving force?
Well, I'll comment by saying you're absolutely right. The why is critically important because we do have very long careers. As a runner, I like to use the analogy of a marathon, right? This is a marathon, not a relay race. And you have ups and downs throughout your career. So having a solid foundation in your why becomes important because in those low times in your career, you have to revert back to that, and it reinvigorates you and reminds you of why this was so important for you. There's a lot of sacrifices in this profession, shift work, night shift, holidays, being away from your family. Our family serves with us in this profession. So recognizing what, the why why make those sacrifices? You have to have a strong sense of purpose in order to do that. I don't think my underlying why has changed all that much throughout my career. I think it's more a little bit about the how has changed. How I serve has become different. Going from a line level officer or investigator to a supervisor, in a way, you stop doing the job and you start becoming responsible for people who do the job. And your job truly becomes about the people who you work with and who report into you. And then that's true, certainly, as you elevate through the organization. And as chief, you just have more stakeholders you serve, right? So, it's absolutely my entire department. But beyond that, it's the community we police. It's my stakeholders at City Hall and my fellow executives and department directors and other city employees. There's a lot of folks that depend on us.
Yeah, and I loved that your why stayed the same, but your how changed. And we talked about this a little bit offline, but the ability to adapt and to grow over time is so important, not just in your career, but in life, and to, have the ability to change with the times and to learn and to know that, maybe you don't do things perfect the first time, but you're willing to,
Sure.
learn and to grow, throughout your career, but also the different roles.
Yeah.
I want to know, so fast forward, you've been in this career for 30 years. You said that you were a runner. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your wellness. What has kept you physically fit and mentally fit throughout the 30 years?
Sure. So before I get into physical exercise, I want to start just with talking about nutrition. So, I kind of am a subscriber to the adage that you are what you eat, and I'll throw in and drink. And, I'm not perfect in this regard. I've got a wicked sweet tooth, and I have a wife who's an incredible baker. So that's
Deadly combo.
Deadly combo right there. And, it's kind of the old adage of moderation. So I think on a day-to-day basis, my mindset on nutrition is to try and fuel my body as best as I can. I like to focus on trying to eat lean proteins and vegetables as much as possible throughout the week. But like I know, for example, later this week, I've got dinner plans with my family and we're going to go out and, I'm going to enjoy myself and I'm going to have a nice meal, and it's not going to be perfect. And maybe I will order dessert that day. And it's a little bit about give and take. Something else that really helps me is, sugar. Sugar is the enemy today for a lot of reasons. It really has a big impact on our overall health. So, for me, I've cut out soft drinks completely. I don't drink them. It's unneeded sugar, especially when I know that I'd rather have the cookie anyway at the end of the day. So that's a little bit of balance for me. And then just knowing that I've got, I can't do it alone. So I need friends and colleagues to help keep me accountable, especially when you're at work. And sometimes, you're running from meeting to meeting, or if you're a patrol officer, call to call, or whatever it is. Our days get really busy. So it's tempting to just hit that drive-through or whatnot. So you got to pre-plan a little bit, whether that's, looking at meal prep, or whether that's just being more intentional about bringing your lunch. I actually bring my lunch a lot to work, and that helps me control what I eat. The other thing I really try and do is I keep a food journal, and it's shocking, especially when you maybe cheat a little bit during the holidays or whatnot. And, you want to get back into fighting weight. You want to make sure that writing down what you eat is a real good deterrent and a real good way to keep focused on eating healthy. And then number two, also to recognize how you feel when you eat something. I think we gloss over that sometimes. We just eat, and then we're not thinking about, well, how did that make me feel when I ate it? And especially as you get older, that changes a little bit. So you got to pay attention to those things. Some people keep a written food journal. I'm a bit of a tech junkie, so I keep an electronic one. And the beauty about that is it balances with my exercise. So now it becomes a math game for me. Can I eat less calories than I burn in any given day? And it's kind of a challenge for me day in and day out to do that. So that's a little trick that I try and do with nutrition. On the exercise front, for me, I never used to be a runner. In fact, I was the runner prior to the academy that would get shin splints.
Mhm.
And I never was like super quick as a sprinter, never had the endurance or stamina for long distance running. And it kind of became a social thing for me at first, where, here in the West Coast, we're very big into the Baker to Vegas Challenge Cup relay race. And I was challenged to do that one year, and that kind of started my love affair with running. And it became an escape for me mentally, that I stopped even taking music with me when I ran. And that became my time to think through problems and to really kind of think about how my day went, what I did well, what I could improve upon. And at the same time, I'm kind of cleaning those toxins out of me, out of my mind, and having an opportunity for thought and some quiet time away from, all the people that I'm responsible for and to, and have some time for me. So I prioritized exercise every day. Like for me, I'm not a morning person, but I make a point to get up in the morning and exercise first thing, because I know if I don't do that, I may not get the chance later in the day. Other friends that I have, they know, hey, at the end of work, that's their exercise time. But just as important, they build their day around their exercise time. So those are little kind of secret sauce tips that I use for nutrition and exercise to help keep myself accountable.
I love that. And I want to touch on both points, but I want to start with the physical exercise and you running. And I don't know if you recognize that you're doing this, but I love that you said secret sauce because it's offloading.
Right.
Like that's what you're doing. You're taking a moment for yourself without the noise
Mm-hmm.
to, like you said, filter through things, maybe not think about things, and to just be with yourself. And I think a lot of people miss that. I
Sure.
think that we're so distracted. There's always things going on with work, family, social media, movies, TV, like whatever it is. And it's so, so important to have those moments of pause. And I think that in a sense, that is what you're doing. You're pausing and you're taking that time to be in the silence and in the stillness of the mind to be able to sort through those things rather than like distracting yourself with escaping or numbing or whatever that is. And so I think that's so powerful. And I think that you can find that in so many different ways. Running is obviously that thing for you. But there's, other things that people do, working out or swimming or meditation or whatever it is.
Or yoga, perhaps.
Or yoga, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't want to name drop yoga. I was like, they're going to expect me to say yoga.
I did it for you. It's okay.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, so one of the biggest pushbacks that I hear all the time is like, we don't have time.
Yeah.
Like we're so busy, we don't have time. And
Sure.
so for someone who's listening and you're like, yes, like journal, keep track of your food, get up early, do the damn thing, prioritize
Yeah.
it. If you get that, like, well, I just don't have time,
Sure.
pushback, like what would your response to something like that be?
Well, two things. Like I said earlier, you got to be intentional about it. So for me, I literally look at my calendar for the following day and I build it in. So I know ahead of time what I'm going to do that day. Like, am I going to do weightlifting? And that is important. Absolutely. Being a runner, I will absolutely say, especially as you get older, building in some weightlifting for strength and conditioning is really important. Also really important for your bone structure. So I want to encourage people to consider that as well. But you got to know what you're going to do, and then make it easy to get it done. So, I'm going to talk about sleep in a little bit, but number one, make sure you get to bed at a reasonable hour. So if you are going to wake up early to get your exercise in before you start your day, that you are ready and rested to go. Another little thing that I like to do is I actually put my workout clothes, I set them up next to my bed before I go to sleep. So I've got my workout gear, I've got my socks, I've got my workout shoes. They're literally right next to my bed, all laid out. So in the morning, when it's dark and I'm foggy and I don't, I'm just kind of in that haze, it's there. And I'm like, literally, I open my eyes and I'm looking at it. And it's another, almost like a shaming of myself. Like, hey, that's mocking you, that workout gear right there. You got to get it in the wash. So you better use it. And that's another way to kind of keep yourself accountable. The snooze alarm, that can be an enemy. Like I said, I'm not a morning person, so I don't just wake up at the crack of dawn on my own. So I have a deal with myself. Like it's one snooze and then I'm up. That's it. And that seems to work for me, but you got to hold yourself accountable to get up and do it.
100%. And I feel like you looked right at me when you said that because I'm a four snoozer person. And I'm not a monster in the morning, but it definitely is hard for me to wake up. So I'm going to use that moving forward. One snooze, that's it, you're up, and then get
Yep.
going. And I do also like the idea of taking away all the unnecessary obstacles in advance to set yourself up for success because you do, like when you wake up and there's all the excuses going on in your head, like, oh, like I got to get up and then I got to like find my clothes or I
Right.
have to do this or that. And so when it's all laid out and you make it easy for yourself, you're far more likely to actually do the thing. So I do like that. It's really good advice. So were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to
Yeah.
comment on both nutrition and exercise.
Yeah.
Um, don't feel like you got to be perfect. And
Mhm.
if you make a mistake and you do hit the snooze button 4 times and you have to skip your workout, don't beat yourself up about it. Figure a way that you can maybe get your workout in later that day in those instances. Because I think we all have those bad mornings where, the night before, maybe you didn't sleep great
Mhm.
or, you just got a lot on your mind. I would counter that with the exercise going to help with that.
Yeah.
But when you have those bad eat days or when you have those bad sleep days, don't beat yourself up. The next best time to fix that is the following day and just get right back on track and you're good to go.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I also think that something is better than nothing.
Sure.
And sometimes when we are set out to do a goal, we think that if it's all or nothing. And sometimes like you can build those habits over time if you just do a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
A few minutes is better than no minutes. And so if you do wake up late, but maybe you do have time to like just run around your block or walk around your block once.
Mm-hmm.
Just get moving and do it. Or maybe you have 5 minutes to, do a mindfulness practice or whatever your
Yeah.
thing is that you like, work out, and you can do it for 5, 10 minutes and that's it, then that's great. And then over time
Yep.
it can evolve and you can build the habit and you can extend those things. But sometimes I feel like people think, oh, well, if I don't get a full hour or if I don't get a full, mile run or whatever it is, then it's not worth going. And I
Sure.
always say like, small changes create big impact over time. And so something's better than nothing. I don't know if you agree with that.
Absolutely. I used as you were talking, I was thinking about, I didn't start running half marathons by running 13.1 miles. I started
Exactly.
by running 1 mile. And then, gradually they talk about running, trying to increase your long runs by 10% as you're getting to build up your lung capacity and your muscles to be able to run that distance and your endurance. So you got to be able to recognize and give yourself grace that you're not going to be perfect from day one. But again, as you said, the sooner you start, the better. And little changes make a big difference down the road.
100%. So I'd love to hear about sleep. Let's talk about
Yes.
sleep.
So, I mean, that's probably when you and I first met, actually, in my role on the California Police Chiefs Association Wellness Committee, talking about fatigue and sleep. I've done a lot of writing and research in this area, and I'm not going to spend too much time diving into this area because I could probably talk for hours about it. But the bottom line, if you're an adult living in our country right now, there's no shortcuts to sleep. You need 7+ hours of sleep each night. And there's no makeups, there's no like, oh, you know what? I slept terrible last night. I only got 4 hours of sleep. Tomorrow's Saturday. I'm going to make up my sleep tomorrow. And it doesn't work that way. Like you either get your sleep or you don't.
Mhm.
And sleep is super important. Like it does so much for us. It literally cleans toxins out of our brain. It's one of the ways that our brain resets itself throughout the day. It helps our body recover from the activities and everything that we're challenged with on a day-to-day basis. So what I'm going to recommend to your viewers is to kind of focus on 3 things in order to get a good night's sleep. Number one is routine. The second is a concept called sleep hygiene. And then the third is environment. So I'm going to talk about routine real quick. So routine is, there's a lot of research about this, to try and go to the bed at around the same time every night. building that routine. Now, that's really hard if you're working nights. It's probably okay during your work week that you can try and get to sleep around the same time. But on the weekends, when you are on your days off and you flip back to trying to be a normal human being again and associate with family, it can be challenging during that transition day or two. So just trying to be intentional about when you go to sleep and when you wake up is very important to getting a good night's sleep. Um, Hygiene, really, you know what? You gotta not eat or drink too close to bedtime. I would also tell you, you got to be careful. If you're one of those folks that likes to exercise at night, you don't want to exercise too close to when you go to bed because you get amped up. And you want to make sure that you have an opportunity to physically cool off, but also to just wind down from that workout. So, you got to give yourself at least an hour or more if you're going to work out before you go to bed. And then the big temptation, we're in bed and what do we have in our hands? It's
Our
our
phones,
devices.
our TVs,
I
all the
mean,
things.
that blue light is not good for sleep. It really stimulates your mind, and it will, whether you know it or not, just it will prohibit you or inhibit you, I should say, is a better word, from really trying to fall asleep and getting a good REM sleep cycle. So cut those devices out at least 30 minutes before bedtime. And that's going to help your mind start to unplug and wind down. I'm a big believer, you mentioned it earlier, in like meditations or mindfulness too. And one of the tools that I've used through a meditation app is adult bedtime stories. It sounds kind of silly. We think about like children's bedtime stories, but I mean, these are kind of cool stories that are about interesting topics. And of course, the narrator is always somebody with a really nice, soothing voice. And, this is the only reason I know they work, because I've put them on and I've never heard the end of one. In those environments where you're just having a hard time shutting your mind off and you can't get to sleep, there are apps out there with either white noise or these stories that you can listen to, and they just really get you in that right mindset to unwind, kind of do a physical check of your body, and then start drifting off into a good night's sleep. So that's a really good idea to try and do that. And then the last point about sleep, environment, it is important that you have a good bedroom environment. And this is really important, I think, for people who work shift work in particular. If you're trying to sleep during the day, you've got to create a comfortable, cool, and very dark environment. Otherwise, you're fighting your own body. You're fighting your circadian rhythm with that sun being up. Your body wants to be up no matter how tired you are during the day. So blocking out your room, making sure it's a cool environment. Our bodies need a cool environment. And then obviously it goes without saying, you should have a quiet space to minimize those disruptions. And just like exercise, sleep really cleanses toxins from your body and from your mind. And it's really important to try and get a good night's sleep.
I feel like we can mic drop right there. No, honestly, that was great advice. And I'm shaking my head yes, because I completely agree with you. Every single thing that you said is spot on. And I think it just goes back to what we said before, is like just try little steps,
Yeah.
like one thing at a time. And so if there's one thing, like one actionable thing that someone's like, oh, that sounds like a lot, and I am busy or whatever the excuses are, what would you prioritize on that list? What is like the very, very first thing that you would say, step one, do this. And then once that's good,
Yeah.
you can move on down that list.
I think probably the easiest thing to start with is just creating a good environment. Making sure that your bedroom is in a good spot. If you are working during day shift, that you have blackout drapes on your windows, or that you're creating the right environment. You want to set yourself up for success. So I think that's the easiest place to start, is creating a good sleep environment.
Awesome. And the bedtime stories.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have, like a specific one that you use? We just like tell some people like out there
Yeah,
some resources.
there's a ton out there. There's a great app that I've used before called Calm, CALM. They do
Perfect.
wonderful mindfulness, and then they also have just a repertoire of different sleep stories that you can listen to, which is a great way to kind of wind things down at the end of a busy day.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
So we talked a little bit before too. So we talked about nutrition. We talked about the importance of exercise and
Yep.
prioritizing your physical health, especially, wanting to have a long career, but I think also the goal is to have a long and successful retirement. We talked about sleep and setting yourself up for success with sleep. Tell me about your time out philosophy, because
Yeah,
this is something you mentioned earlier, and I was like, I love that, and I think that that is so cool. So dive a little bit into that. You have a philosophy about timeouts.
I do. So I actually learned this, gosh, only about 5 years ago. So I feel bad that I spent most of my adult life not having this in my toolbox, if you will. But I learned it from my boss when I became a new police chief. And my city manager shared this philosophy. Obviously another stressful job being a city manager, and he passed on this concept to me of making sure you're intentional with your timeouts or time away. In other words, so he always challenged me. He'd always joke with me, like, "Hey, Adam, when's your next vacation? What do you got planned?" And it was in jest, but at the same time, he was being really serious. And he shared with me one day the advice that I still use to this day. He's like, "Hey, I always have my next two trips planned. And as soon as I take one, I start planning the next one." And just the anticipation of planning the trip can be exciting. If you're a very organized person like I am, you should see my sock drawer. Like, just the planning of the trip is fun for me. So that can create some excitement and anticipation. And then obviously the trip itself will be a ton of fun to be away from work and get away. Now, what I would, caution everybody, like we've been talking about through the entire podcast today, is I'm not talking about every trip has to be a grand escape to Europe. These can be simple, even day trips that you plan on a day off to just get away for a little while, spend time with friends, family, loved ones, and try and disconnect a little bit from work, all the way up to and including that really highly anticipated big vacation that you have planned. So, like, I'm thinking in my mind, I've already got my next two planned. I can tell you right now where they are and when I'm going. And then I'm thinking about the third already. I haven't even really dove too much into that, but we're getting some ideas going because my first one is coming up here in another 3 or 4 weeks. And I know I got to start planning on my next one. But, you can, that's the macro level timeout.
Right.
You can bring this down to the micro level too. And I think creating an environment where it's okay on a daily basis to kind of mentally check out for a little bit is really a good idea for anyone in our profession, whether you're line level or whether you're a policing executive. And I'll use it a good example. In my command staff, we have a philosophy that in the afternoons, we'll try and connect with each other and see how we're doing, just checking in, finding out how the day has been, do a temperature check. And we will try and actually physically get out of the office and walk for a
Yeah.
short period of time. And we use that as an opportunity to catch up. But really, what we're doing, we're kind of exercising a little bit on a small scale, and we're changing our environment, getting out of the office, stimulating our minds with a new environment, and then resetting ourselves to come back for the last few hours of the day and have a great end to our day. So that's a huge advantage, and it's not a big investment. I'm talking 10, 15 minutes. Change your environment, get out of your office, put down the work that you're doing and step away. So I like the idea of, it can be grand. It can be on the macro level that you've got that great trip to Spain or Italy or wherever you've got on the horizon. Or it can be really small, like, hey, this afternoon, we're going to go to that new coffee place and check it out. And we're going to, try and walk over there or get some steps in as we're doing that as well.
I'm going to touch on what you said, but as a side note, I feel like you're the person that gets to the airport 3 hours early. Am I
I
right?
I do like checking out the planes too. Yes, I'm definitely prepared. Yes.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think you're exactly right. I think that, again, it goes back to what we said, the small things that you can do, those small steps, whether that's walking outside, going to the coffee shop, like taking yourself out of that environment is so important. And I think it's the opportunity to zoom out a little bit and to get perspective on things.
Yeah.
And I am so guilty of this. Like I will be head down in the weeds for so long, and it feels like that's the only thing. It's like what is going on right now is the only thing. It's the only reality. But when you can take a break and you can zoom out, whether that's micro or macro, it gives you that perspective. It gives you that space to be able to like breathe for a second. And I do think that it gives you more inspiration. You start to see things in a different light when you can
Yeah.
kind of zoom out a little bit. When you're so inundated in that moment, things can feel really chaotic or heavy or stressful. And so I love the idea of doing that on a daily basis because I think those are actionable things that someone can do tomorrow
Right.
to change, their perspective and to give themselves some space. But I also do love the idea of having a little bit of normalcy
Mhm.
and being with loved ones. And that's one of the pieces of advice that I hear a lot from leadership like yourself, where it's like, have something outside the job. Whether that's a hobby or something like to do like travel, or have friends that aren't in law enforcement that you can, connect with and be with so that you can have conversations that don't revolve around that. And so I think it's a great idea to take yourself out of it, have something to look forward to,
Yeah.
zoom out a little bit. So,
No, it's a big deal, and I really just wanted to expand on a point that you made about, earlier, retirement. We want to reach retirement, but we want to live healthy and enthusiastically in our retirement. And in order to do that, you have to have things to look forward to. So I think many of us, especially in leadership positions, you kind of get wrapped up. Your identity becomes what your role is, whether you're a lieutenant or a chief or a captain or whatever you may be in your organization. And you go on 100 miles per hour every
mhm.
day, all day long. And then all of a sudden your retirement comes and that's it. You're stopped. It's done. And it's like, hey, big guy, go take out the trash. Not, prepare for the city council meeting or whatever it is that you've got on the horizon. So you've got to be mindful that, our careers have an end date, and we're more than our careers, although our careers are very important to us. And we want to make sure that all these things that I'm talking about today, they could apply to our profession. They could apply to our retirement. I think those are all important things to consider.
100%. And I love that you said that because I do think that everyone's ultimate goal is to be able to enjoy their life for as long as possible.
Absolutely.
And no one wants to retire and not be able to move or retire and have a big health issue, where like you said, that's it. And it's just like you have a couple years left, or,
Sure.
you want to get on the other side of it and still have life left and a good quality life left.
Absolutely.
So,
And everyone that works in our profession, it doesn't matter what your role is, our jobs are really challenging and they're really stressful. There's a lot that happens to us in our career that we can't control. So these are all things that you have direct control over and will give you a sense of purpose and direction that you sometimes don't have the opportunity in our day-to-day life to have direct decision making over. So it's a great way to plan and to, as you talked about, get to the end game, which is to live beyond what our jobs are and let that next generation take the helm.
100%. So, okay, so we went through your career.
Yep.
We went through all of the things that you do from a physical, mental, nutritional perspective. Tell me about organizationally. So, one of the big things, and we talked about this before, but I get a lot of feedback of like, we don't know where to start. We don't know what to do. And obviously, California is really progressive, and, wellness is something that's really embraced by California, and you guys are ahead of the curve. But there are a lot of agencies out there that really don't know where to start or what to do. And so I would love to hear your perspective and your feedback on wellness programming and what you do organizationally. And maybe talk about some of the things that you've tried that haven't worked, because I think that we can learn from other, people's failures, but then also like things that have worked and things that you have found to be successful, as a good stepping stone for those who are trying to build a wellness program for themselves.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about what you can do for your organization. And I'm going to preface this with, you don't have to be the leader of an organization or even in a position of formal leadership to institute and influence change in your organization. So I think the first thing that anybody can do is start to understand what's going on in our profession. So you got to be an avid reader and you've got to be an avid student to be able to learn what not only I would describe as the best practices are, but maybe what the next practices are going to be.
Mm.
So there's a lot of resources out there. We talked earlier, Paige, you and I met at a conference years ago, and that's a great place to start. So there are amazing conferences out there, that different states sponsor. More international conferences like the International Associations of Chief of Police. They put on a great annual conference and an annual wellness conference for that matter. And they're really bringing in subject matter experts from around the region, or in IACP's case, around the world, to talk about what's happening in and out of our profession on this topic. So you can learn and not have to invent the wheel here. You can learn from what others have done and think about, okay, I like that idea, but I don't think it would work that way in my organization or department. How could I change it in order to make it a good fit here? Like we talked about with personal wellness, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be tried. And you have to be able to be comfortable with a mindset of, don't fear trying something because it may fail.
Yeah.
In fact, I would argue that if you fail, you are going to have an opportunity to learn so much from that failure. And yeah, I'll mention a couple of programs that we've instituted that have done, really well and succeeded. But we've had our share of failures in our organization. Wellness is a big deal for me and our organization, but it's taken a little longer to implement some of these ideas than I would like. But change is messy. And in order for change to stick, you got to get a lot of people to buy into it. So that takes time. And you have to keep preaching the message. So number one, talking about the why. We talked about the why as far as career goes. Well, we talk about the why as to why is this change important? What's in it for me as a person? Change can be challenging for people. Change can be scary for people, especially if you don't understand the why behind it. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to influence change in your organization, whatever it is, explaining the need for the change is really important. What we have going for us is there's a ton of research out there on this topic. So you can do a little bit of research, even on our friend Google, and get some great articles and things back quickly about why the change is important and what ideas may be out there. One good example of something simple that we instituted that was very successful was on the nutrition front. So, hey, we have a lot of people who work different shifts, and it's very tempting, at 4 a.m. to think about, that drive-through looks really good right now, and I'm going to hit it for the third time this week, and there's really no other options. What am I going to do? It's this place or nothing. So we instituted and partnered with a healthy meal company to bring in healthy meals for our employees. And it wasn't so grand. Like the department wasn't paying for free food for our people. Our employees had to pay, but we facilitated a partnership with a local company to have, for lack of a better term, it was like a fridge that was a vending machine, that you could have healthy meals that got delivered throughout the week. And you literally just scanned your debit card or credit card, the door opened, you picked what meal you wanted, you closed, and it charged you for it. And awesome. It's like super simple. And I used it quite frequently. That, sometimes I'm running out the door for an early morning meeting. I'm still kind of a little sweaty from my workout, and I don't have time to pack my lunch, or I didn't do my homework and meal prep the night before. I knew that healthy food option was there. and I could grab it and I could see all the macronutrients that were on the package, and like that was the one for me and good to go. So that was a really popular change that we instituted, and it was for a long time. And now I'll talk about the failure until that company went out of business.
Oh no.
And then now we're in this, unfortunate situation that we have a program that was very popular and well received, and we haven't found a replacement yet. So good news is on the way. There are other vendors and suppliers out there, and we're working right now to try and find a better replacement for that company that went out of business. But these type of solutions are all around us, and you can find these companies in at least most metropolitan areas to try and bring into your organization as a good example. Another program that was really well received, there's a lot of grants out there. And we were really fortunate to receive a federal grant that allowed us to completely remodel our fitness center. So, hey, physical fitness is important, and we want to provide nice facilities for our employees. But I didn't sit there as chief and write this grant. We had a group of line level employees that thought of the idea, and we helped facilitate it. We showed them how to apply for the grant, how to write it. We told them we would support them if they were successful in doing it. And it was messy. Like, it took a long time, and there was some back and forth with edits, but they learned how to do it, number one. And number two, they got the grant. And
Awesome.
We literally just over a holiday break period were able to remodel and bring in new fitness equipment to our aging fitness center, which is really cool. So two little examples of successes and kind of failures that we've had.
Thank you. And I wanted to touch on, so one of the things you said was the word buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
We hear it all the time.
Yep.
It's like, how do you get buy-in? And, your advice was saying the why, and, saying why this is important and why you're changing things, and, why you're prioritizing these things. What have you found has been the biggest challenge with buy-in? Is it that it's scary for things to change? Is it that everyone has different whys and different things that they want? Like, what do you find to be the biggest challenge for getting buy-in? And do you think that the solution is, leadership and, continuing to practice what you preach and talk about it? Or what would your advice be for someone who's struggling with buy-in?
Yeah, so I think in any organization, you always have innovators, right? These are the minority of folks in your organization that, they're the kind of folks that they're going to line up outside the store at 3 a.m. on the release date of the new tech product or whatever that's out there, right? I would include myself in that group. But yeah, you've got a bunch of folks that are just naturally drawn to change and new ideas, but that's not true. I mean, most of us are scared of it, and there's a few reasons why. And when we're talking about work and talking about a change of work environment, there's a fear of loss. Like, what is this change going to mean I lose? And there's a fear of the unknown, like, how is this change going to impact me? So I think as a leader, regardless of your rank, to work with people to explain the why and how this change is going to impact them is important. To take those small group of innovators and bring on some what I would describe as early adopters. Mm-hmm. You want to have some folks that see, oh, I get that. That makes sense. Like that food program, I understand that I'm going to have to pay for the food, but I would have to pay for the food if I went to the drive-thru. Right. And you mean this is better for me? And it tastes good, and I don't have to go pick it up. Like, you start getting those folks in that they start selling it for you. So you've got to get, in today's YouTube world, what I would describe as some influencers on board, right? Some informal leaders in your organization to understand the why, and then they'll kind of sell this for you. If it makes sense and you're doing it for the right reasons, and the time is right, these folks are going to get that 80% in the center to understand and start adopting this new program or philosophy or change that you're trying to implement.
And do you think that that's the best way to break any stigmas associated with wellness, is to really let that happen organically through, various leaderships? And I've heard canaries. I don't know if you've heard this expression,
sure.
Through canaries, and talking about
coal
it.
mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think that is um, a productive way to break stigma, or what is your opinion on that?
So, yes, if you as a leader support that group vocally, right? So if you're going to have your innovators out there and you're going to back them to implement a new program or idea, I think as a leader, you've got to be very vocal in your support of those folks. And then there's always, as a leader, your responsibility to not only, walk the walk or talk the talk, but walk the walk, right? So you've got to also kind of model that positive behavior and be an example to others that this change is not scary. This change will benefit you. This change will be good for you, and be very reassuring. We always trying to have a mindset of moving in a forward positive direction. But if you move too quickly, you're going to lose people. Mm-hmm. So how do you apply constant, gentle, positive pressure and reassure people along the way? Those are little things you can do to help hopefully ensure success of the change initiative that you're trying to implement. But not always. Sometimes it results in failure, and you got to recognize when something is not going to work and not be afraid to step away from it and say, okay, hey, clearly either the timing wasn't right or this idea wasn't right. We need to shelve that for now, and then we're going to pivot to plan B and go from there.
Yeah, I love it. And I completely agree. All right, I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
One is kind of a big question. We talked about your past, we talk about the present, and I want to ask your opinion about the future. So if you could, wave a magic wand.
Sure.
And you could have everything you wanted when it comes to wellness, whether that's different buckets or different programming, what would the future look like for wellness for you if you could wave a magic wand?
So, we talked about a few tangible things today, but there's some things we haven't talked about in regards to wellness. And one of the big ones, and there's sometimes stigma associated with this, is going to be psychological wellness. Breaking the stigma behind what we are exposed to throughout our career. So, I've done some reading on the topic of critical incidents. Things like the unexpected death of a loved one, a horrific car accident that you may be involved in, mass casualty incident, something really unusual. And what the research talks about is for a normal citizen, they may experience somewhere between like 2 and 5 of these during their lifetime. In policing, the research talks about, and we will experience between 200 to 300 of these events during the course of our career. Mm-hmm. That's not normal. And I don't think my generation has done a great job of acknowledging that and providing resources to support people throughout their career. Or if we do, we tend to focus on the big ones. Obvious things like an officer involved shooting case or something where, there's a significant injury involved. But we haven't been as good in the past about recognizing like cumulative psychological trauma and finding ways for people to decompress and deal with those kind of issues. We're getting better today at it, I think. Mm-hmm. So recognizing that, hey, it's okay to not be okay. I would also say it's okay to be okay. Like these events impact people differently. And there are some, like, you don't want to dote over somebody and they all of a sudden are starting thinking like, well, should I not be okay? Like, I feel okay. What's going on here? And no, hey, that's totally good. And if you're good, we're good. I just want to check on you. We had an incident like this recently, a significant incident, and I've been checking on the involved officers regularly. And, even one of them talked to me, kind of reluctantly went and saw our psychologist, but he was a field supervisor and thought that it was important that he model that behavior. So he went, and his response to me was, I went, Chief, just because I felt like I had to, and I thought it was a good example to the other officers involved. And he said, you know what? I'm really glad I did. And I got a lot out of it. So that's important.
That's great.
Kind of on the same note too, for those who have a strong spiritual component to their personal life, I think recognizing that programs like chaplain programs can also fill a bit of that void. You got to find, on your menu of offerings, the right items on there to support your personnel, to recognize that some of your employees may have spiritual needs that you can help field through a program like that is important as well. And then just for us to recognize from the get-go that all these are important areas and that we should work to create good environments, to be supportive, recognizing the demands of our job. So let's work on controlling what we can control, knowing that we often work in an uncontrolled environment, if that makes sense.
Right.
So let's be proactive about trying to support our folks and do what we can, recognizing that it's going to be messy. It's never going to be perfect. It may start and stop at times, but we don't want to not try it for fear of failure or because we don't think it's going to work.
Thank you. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and it's so inspiring to hear you talk about all of these topics that you're so passionate about. And it does seem, I mean, it's very apparent, like I said, known you for a couple of years, and it's apparent that this is something you're passionate about, and it's something
Absolutely.
that you try to instill not just in yourself, but in your people and your organization. So the last question I have for you is, being on this job for 30 years, what words of advice would you give to someone who's newer in their career, or maybe someone who's just starting out, something that maybe you wish you would have known earlier that would have helped out, or a piece
Sure.
of advice that, you wish you would have listened to that could have set you up for success for a long and successful career?
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple exercise, but we talked about the why at the beginning of this conversation, and we've actually referenced it several times throughout the conversation in different contexts. So if you're just starting out this career, you're probably full of energy, you haven't experienced a whole lot yet, and your why about, why did you get into this profession? Why did you already commit to doing things like going through the police academy and the stresses of field training? So I think while it's still fresh in your mind, write your future self a letter and be clear about what your why was for doing all of this. And what I would recommend is tuck that away somewhere. There'll be a point in your career, as I mentioned earlier, like we're going to hit a low at some point. Pulling out that letter and remembering your why and not losing that why is going to help you get through those low times throughout your career. It sounds simple, and I think it is simple actually, but it's something that I don't think many of us do, and it's really important. Another thing that's important, and I started this actually when I was an investigator, and I still do it to some extent today. For those of you who are writers, journal. We've got an incredible profession. They make movies and TV shows about what we do because it's extraordinary. And I tell my employees this all the time, like your ordinary day is extraordinary for everybody else. It may be something as simple as going on a traffic collision, but why do we have traffic on the freeways? Because people stop and look at it because it's unusual. And all the way up to the just crazy wildness that we see with police pursuits and the unusual cases that we investigate. So at some point, you're going to want to reflect on that, or your family may want to reflect on that. And it's very cathartic, actually, to write that out and journal it. Now, for me as chief, it just might be something like a really weird city council meeting that I went through. And writing that out gives me perspective and helps kind of capture some of those memories for me. So it's another tool. I don't want to say coping tool necessarily, but it's another tool to help release some of that tension and stress, and something that you may look back on fondly later in your career to be able to do.
I love that. You are the first person I've ever heard that said that about writing your future self a letter and using that to get out of hard times. I think that that is genius, and I'm going to take that too and do that like tonight. Just to have something, because we all go through hard times, but I think especially
Sure.
like you said, you in this career, and I agree that you are extraordinary, and everyone in this community who's doing this job and shows up every day to, be there for their team and their community is extraordinary and true superheroes. Honestly, I say that all the time. I really truly believe that. And I just want to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your insights and your knowledge and your passion for wellness. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, you're welcome, first of all. And secondly, I wanted to thank you, Paige. You make us better. And I think that you challenge us to question the status quo in our profession and to think differently. about if we could do things differently. I ask my staff this regularly, like, hey, if money, time, politics, obstacles weren't in our way, what could we do about whatever the issue is that we're facing? So when you think about wellness and you think about that context, don't worry about money. Don't worry about the politics of it yet. Just have the conversation about the idea and then start thinking about, okay, well, this is really viable. How could we do that then, as the follow-up question? Are some simple ways that you can start down that road of getting something done. And, every agency that I've seen that has the ideal, or what I would describe as the closest to ideal wellness program, they started with just one or two things. And then over time, they continue to add to their toolbox of offerings that they had for their employees. And really, anything you do to invest in your employees is only going to benefit your organization and your community that we serve. So it's a worthwhile investment, and it's something that I consider very important, and something I would encourage all of your leaders and viewers to consider.
100%. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paige.
Thank you.